The filibuster goes boom. It
I
happens.
know. It's like we're used to Republicans doing these things, but Democrats, look at us stepping up, showing some cajones, if you will.
This is such an interesting. It was such a small thing, and it was such a small thing in terms of like what happened and procedurally. This, I think, is going to have such radical implications going forward for years and years, some of which will benefit a progressive agenda, some of which will not, and potentially could be very, very problematic from a partisan perspective, but beneficial from a sort of a big D Democratic perspective. It is fascinating what this rules change is going to do. So let's break this down in a couple of ways. Let's start
Right.
with it first. Just let's remind folks about the process that brought us to here. Then we will talk about the sort of the practical, short-term practical implications, and then there are sort of long-term practical implications that could be very problematic, and then there are also short and long-term political implications. I mean, this is so huge that it's I think the beauty of this audience is that only really this audience can really appreciate, I think, in many respects, how huge this is.
It is, and as you said, there's an enormous number of implications. Enormous. This will reverberate in very many ways. The simple reason, why we're doing this, how we got here, is that in completely unprecedented way, the Republicans have used this their what's supposed to be their advise and consent role in the Senate, which is somebody who's a complete goon. We can't pass them. They've got major ethics problems, or they are far off the map of what anybody considers acceptable. On both left and right, will block them. But for the most part, a president's nominees to run their, cabinet positions, sub-cabinet positions, various agencies, and their judges, except for in extraordinary circumstances, are supposed to just be accepted, right? In the history of this country, there have been 168 presidential nominees filibustered. 82 of those have been Barack Obama's. 82 of 168. So do a little math there, and you'll come up with about 50% of those in the 200-year history plus year history of this country, and half have been Obama's. That should give you an idea how ridiculous this has been.
Now, let me just say this. What's fascinating, and I would say that back in June, we were talking about how there was a plan that Harry Reid had in consultation with the president to nominate 3 justices in rapid succession to the D.C. Circuit Court, which we've mentioned on this program many times, is the second most important court in the country.
Yes.
And
the one that John Roberts sat on, the one that Janice Rogers Brown, who is a lunatic, that Bush's people got put on. We can talk about that a little bit when they threatened to go nuclear, because it's fun to watch all the hypocritical comments from Republicans who were there then or are there now, who went after the prescription drug requirement in Obamacare. It's a very important. The D.C. Circuit, the court, the appellate court, there is a very important court, and
we're gonna talk about that more, because this is where all of sort of the executive actions, which could have real policy implications, end up getting overturned or pushed back.
That's correct.
But the plan was to do this in rapid succession, to make it absolutely clear to the Democratic caucus and to all the players involved here that the obstruction by the Republicans was not, as you say, about the problems with any given nominee, but was in fact nullification. So the point is that there's nobody that could have been nominated to fill the 3 vacancies on this 11 judge court that the Republicans would have confirmed, because they were saying, we don't even believe there should be 11 judges on this court.
Right. I mean, their reasoning was so utterly stupid that there wasn't enough work for the court to do, and they were underworked. Yet, what the rule of that court is when there's overflow work, which there was, which completely sort of shows that they're a bunch of liars, it goes to retired justices. Oh, and magically, the majority of those retired justices are Republicans because they're people put there by Reagan and Bush, and so a lot of these decisions that were being made by conservative justices, and that's the way they like it. And
yes, and you don't even have to go that far.
Their butt kicked.
I think you don't even have to go that far, Cliff, because I think you could say, like, look, there's only one way you get to shrink the size of that court, and that is to pass legislation to shrink the size of that court. And so this was another sort of nullification play in the same way that they were holding the government hostage to repeal Obamacare. They couldn't do it.
Well, in the same way, they've. I mean, you have to go into a much, and I don't mean to cut you off, Sam, but it's a much broader pattern than that.
Yeah.
I mean, we're now looking at a decade and a half where they have used impeachment against a sitting president to nullify his reelection, overwhelming reelection in 1996, where they used recall, which is something that now has become a much more regular aspect of our politics, right, but used to be something that was only used in extraordinary conditions. You know who broke the seal on that one? A guy you may be familiar with, Darrell Issa, because he wanted to buy himself the governorship of California and went after Gray Davis at a time when he was low in the polls because of the economy and various other things. In the end, the irony of it was it didn't end up being him. It ended up being Schwarzenegger because nobody can stand Darrell Issa, even if he has $200 million, to try to buy things for himself. They've used
the Brooks Brothers riot down in Florida, frankly, and all the shenanigans in 2000.
Everything that happened in 2000, the riots, using the Supreme Court, grabbing what was used to be considered a state affair. This was for Florida to figure out. Didn't matter. The Supreme Court grabbed it. If they hadn't, the state legislature said they were going to overturn what the court did. These guys are ready to overturn democracy in any number of ways to grab power for themselves in an election clearly where the man lost the popular vote and lost the electoral vote if all of the votes were counted. Since that time, you can look at any number of things. The Medicare Part D vote, the traditions of the Senate say you don't hold a vote open for longer than 5 minutes or so. They held the vote open for 3 or 4 hours where they searched for hiding Republicans to force them to vote their way. They have used massive gerrymandering to the point where Democrats won by 1.4 million votes. Never in the history of this country before has the side that won the most votes in the House race lost that chamber. The Democrats won by 1.4 million votes, still did not take the House back, even got closer in doing it. Voter suppression in a way that was used, before the Civil War, in the Reconstruction years, up until through Jim Crow. They have used everything they can to suppress Democratic votes. Citizens United are having their Supreme Court judges overturn 100 years of campaign finance law to allow the Koch brothers and every other right-wing lunatic with a big paycheck come in and use their money to degrade the results of elections. And it goes on and on and on. They've used every anti-democratic measure one can imagine. They've destroyed precedent. They've thrown it overboard. And this is what they've done to get what they want when they've lost elections. So for anybody to sit here and think, and then of course, let's just use the last one. They, again, not only were they breaking records for filibustering, but when they couldn't get their judges, and quite arguably a couple of those judges like Janice Rogers Brown were such extremist lunatics that there was an argument that they should have been prevented from being sent on the courts because they don't sit anywhere close to the mainstream of public opinion. But they threatened the nuclear option over their judges in 2005. Mitch McConnell at the time saying judges deserve an up or down vote, but he's never been hypocritical before. And so they made sure that they got their people on the court. Basically what they want is they want to overthrow democracy in every way possible. And on the judge side, let me say quickly, 79% of President Clinton's judges were approved. 91% of George W. Bush's judges were approved, a guy that was never elected in the first place in 2000. And with Obama, it's now to an all-time low of 76%. He's only getting 3/4 of the justices. There's 93 vacancies right now. And don't make any mistake, what the Republicans don't want is the fact that judges last a lot longer than presidencies do. And for the first time in I don't know how many years right now, the Democrats have gone just over by one judge over the majority of our judicial system having Democratic appointed justices. And if Obama fills those 93, it'll be 55 to 45% Democrats to Republicans, which is what it should be considering we'll have had a two-term president. They don't want that. They don't want him to be able to fulfill his constitutional duty to put justices on the court. That is what they were trying to stop. And so with everything I said before, impeachment, extreme gerrymandering, voter suppression, holding open votes for hours, and every other thing these guys have done that go against the grain of our democracy, does anybody here doubt for a second that the Republicans take back the presidency somehow in 2016 and take back the Senate, that they will not just eliminate the filibuster for judicial nominations, but for everything? Of course they will, because they've done so many unprecedented things that no one believed that they would do. And I didn't even bring up, of course, the two government shutdowns, as well as the fact that a majority of both their House and Senate caucus were ready to throw us over the cliff on the debt ceiling, and needed Democrats to bail them out of their insanity. All right, so this is the people you're dealing with. Anybody who thinks they wouldn't go and eliminate the filibuster the minute they get the chance hasn't been paying attention the last 15 years.
Now let me just there's 2 points here I want to just interject. One is we know that Reid has been talking about this for some time. The big question has always been, does he have the 51 votes? People have to remember we have a much more liberal and everything is relative, folks. Senate than we had just 4 years ago. We have no Ben Nelson. We have no Joe Lieberman. We have no Evan Bayh. We have no a little bit less in terms of institutionalists. Carl Levin voted against this because he's very much an institutionalist. You had Manchin.
And Leahy was one of those, and Leahy and Feinstein, who finally were of the institutionalist
Leahy and Feinstein switched. Even Landrieu, who was nervous, she switched. And then, you used to have Inoue from Hawaii, also one of those institutionalists. So this was...
So it's a combination of the institutionalists, and as you said, it's not just... I mean, probably the biggest example you can use is replacing someone like Joe Lieberman with Chris Murphy.
Yes.
Replacing Herb Kohl with Tammy Baldwin. It's like even on the Democratic side...
replacement in Hawaii as well.
That's right. That's right. What's her name? I can't think of her name right now.
No, it's
Hirono.
It's a guy, but I know that actually...
Oh, Brian Schatz. I'm sorry. Yes. So I mean, you even on the Democratic side, not even talking about the races that were won, like Elizabeth Warren over Scott Brown, but just talking about on the Democratic side, in a number of places, moderates, in Lieberman's case, neoconservatives were replaced with progressives,
right,
and that changed a lot.
And you should also note that the implications there are just so huge here. Now, I want to touch on the dangers here for a moment before we go forward and talk about how this is going to affect things politically, because it's not just a question, and people should be clear on this. It's not just a question. Now, all that has now, the filibuster has been removed from all political nominees and all judges, but for justices to the Supreme Court. It's not for legislation. What's that?
Whatever.
Well, I mean, it's not.
That's the only one. The legislation one makes sense. There's no point in doing that because we don't have the House and won't get anything through there anyhow. The Supreme Court one didn't make sense to me. Why make an exception of that?
Well, I think maybe because it's so a lifetime, but I think it's also let's put it this way, there was not the intellectual argument available in the way that there was for all the other judges and nominees.
That's a great point, right? Because they hadn't blocked somebody.
They hadn't blocked anybody yet. And they hadn't blocked anybody in such an egregious fashion. So a tougher argument to make. But the precedent has been...
But Scalia and Kennedy are no spring chickens, both of them.
That's right.
And if something were to happen and they were to have to step down for a variety of reasons... But
here's the argument I made to my wife about that. I said to her, do you know how many judges on the D.C. Circuit, the D.C. Appeals Court, have been filibustered? And she's like, I don't know what that court is. And I said, but if there was 2 that were filibustered in a row on the Supreme Court, or even 1, she would know about it. And
No,
so
you're right. So when that happens, that will get national. You're exactly right about that. That's a very good point.
But now the thing that I think, we also must contemplate here is that, we can talk about had the Republicans been in a position with a Republican president, would they have made this rules change? Undoubtedly. But the precedent is not just set on the filibuster. The precedent is now set on a host of other things in the future. Jim Manley, who was Reed's former chief of staff, I think it was Jim Manley, was on Hayes last night, and he made the point, which, I haven't seen anybody else bring up, like, could the Republicans, next time they're in control of the Senate, could they say, we're going to change the rules and you need 2/3 majority to raise taxes? Now, there's some question as to whether or not, you could say, well, budget reconciliation or whatnot, but 2/3 majority, they could do something like that in the future. The whole point here is, and I think, the point is being made in some circles, that the timing of it makes it somewhat partisan. But long term, this is about big D democracy and saying now people are going to have to own things, even in the future, if they change the filibustering rules for legislation, if they change it, if they change the rules to say you need 2/3 to increase taxes, whatever it is, there's a far more accountability. There's far less like procedural ways in which you can hide what you're doing in some respects. And so this is going to really radically change things, not just from a procedural standpoint, not just from a policy standpoint, but also from a political standpoint. Because from my estimation, the big winner, oddly enough, yesterday was Mitch McConnell. And the big loser, when we talk about Republicans, is Chris Christie. Because now what this is going to do, it is the arguments that this is going to increase polarization in terms of policy, I think is wrong because you couldn't.
McConnell's able to block less, and someone like Chris Christie, you can come in and bring people together. I think. I understand what you're saying.
No. This is my argument. Is that
you're saying that someone like Chris Christie is not as necessary anymore?
No, on the contrary, what happens is that while I think we had reached sort of peak partisanship and polarization in terms of actual policy, I don't think that's why this happened, because the Republicans could not obstruct more. And so they had no threat. There was no leverage here. But rhetorically speaking, all these guys are completely untethered, because now, from a rhetorical standpoint, any nominee that is put up in front of the Senate, every single Republican go out there and say, this is Bill Ayers. And the Democrats are going to pass. In fact, they're incentivized to say every nominee is Bill Ayers. And the Democrats are just going to force them in through their dictatorial move. But while that polarization increases, a guy like Chris Christie, who's selling himself to the Republican Party, is like, I'm one of you, but I can also appear as a moderate. It's the bar for what he has to go, where he has to go rhetorically, has now been raised, because you're going to see a rhetorical, the rhetorical response is going to be so large on the Republican side, because now they don't even have the ability to stop these nominees. They don't pay a price for stopping these nominees. They can go all hog wild on the rhetoric, but that puts the supposed moderates in a tough position if they want to run for something nationally.
But may I present a counter view?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yes, of course. That's why you're here.
It's your show, though, Sam.
I know. I'm just going to. We'll cut this out in post anyway, so don't worry.
Exactly. Cut this out in editing. Jesus Christ. No, I would say that there's some validity to that. I view things also through the prism of Mitch McConnell's reelection, and if elections were held where everyone were high information voters and campaigns were honest, then this would help McConnell in a way, because somebody gets on there and you could say there's nothing I can do. But particularly on the Republican side, Tea Party voters, the base of their party is, for lack of a better word, let's see, what thinking about? Oh yeah, stupid. And they would believe anything. I mean, I saw the recent a recent thing about Liz Cheney. I'm not going to get too far off of what I'm talking about here, but the questions she was being asked that she had to answer. There was an article about her and the situation with the Cheney family, which is hysterical. And like the first question had something to do with how are you going to stop the Bilderbergers? The second question at her town hall meeting. I even calling these town hall meetings as opposed.
Wait, what was her answer? I'm going to tell my dad to call it all off.
It's all gay, like my sister. Was her answer. No, I mean, the second question, there was that, and she didn't know what to say. And the second question was, what are you going to do about President Obama's all-Muslim cabinet? So this is what you're dealing with out there. So if you think Matt Bevin, the guy who's running against Mitch McConnell, who's got millions and millions of dollars because he's an independent businessman, can't put ad after ad on saying that McConnell's weak, a wimp, genuflecting. They won't use a word like that, way too many syllables. But basically giving in to Democrats on everything, letting them appoint their judges, of course he's going to do that. And he's going to blame McConnell for it. He's going to say, well, maybe Mitch McConnell hadn't, he had kept the government shut down longer and had really fought, he would have stopped this. And of course there's no relationship, but it doesn't matter. These people are dumb.
Well, now, okay. So what's McConnell's response going to be?
Weaker.
McConnell's response now is going to be, Bevins is right about this, that President Obama is appointing all Muslim sympathizers to every court and to every position. But the Democrats have been so vicious, partisan, that they forced this vote, and they have, they're oppressing the minorities and the minority in the Senate. And then that makes a guy like Chris Christie's argument that he's just a technocrat and that he's a get things done type of guy. It makes him seem weaker.
No, I agree. It makes Christie seem weaker, but that we're talking. I think that's different. That's in the presidential race. I'm talking about in Mitch McConnell's personal race to get reelected. Bevin can sit there and just say, he's weak, he can't stop it, he won't fight, I will.
Right.
That's what I would do if I knew I were dealing with low information idiots, which they have to know, and that would be my entire ad campaign. So I think in Mitch McConnell's reelection, I think it hurts him. Frankly, it just makes him look weak. Again, he compromises, he gets rolled over. This is the guy you want to reelect because his whole argument in Kentucky is that he's a leader. He's the leader of the caucus. He's the one who can can represent them and everything. And they're going to just be like, look, this guy sucks. I don't know. That is what I think is going to. So I think that there are benefits for some Republicans, but I think there's drawbacks too. In the end, if you're looking at it from our side of things, from a progressive side of things, again, with what we went through and the history of what these guys have done recently, if they want to change the Senate rules to 2/3, having to raise taxes, they'll do it anyhow. They don't need this precedent. They didn't need precedent on impeachment. They didn't need precedent on recall of the governor of the biggest state. Not again for reasons of malfeasance or reasons of being the fact that he had committed some ethical breach, but just because they didn't like his policies. They don't need precedent on any of these things. When they decide they just want to do it, they just do it. And our democracy will be in a lot of trouble, yes, if they do that, let's say, with taxes. But I promise you, if they do that with taxes, they'll use this as an argument for why they're doing it, but they would have just used something else.
Right. No, I agree with that.
This is what we're dealing with.
I agree with that. I do think that they will have I do think that I'm not convinced it's that black and white, but at the end of the day, I think that's okay. I think that's okay because it is time to put the cards on the table, and this it won't be the argument about what they're doing procedurally. It will be they are starving the country of revenue it needs to protect millionaires, and that's a much better argument in my mind, anyways. And so, good.
Yep.
We don't have Democrats arguing about process anymore. Let's just do this, and let's just take. I want to take a couple minutes, and then I want to talk about JFK just briefly. But
can I just say one very quick thing, which is my only fear with this thing is that Obama will still try to be Mr. Nice, Mr. Moderate, Mr. Friendly. if I had more faith in him, I would know 120% this is the right thing to do, because he should stand up right now and nominate people for all 93 of those open judicial posts.
Absolutely.
And get votes on one after another. And if he does that, this was absolutely the right thing to do. If he just does the 3 on the circuit court, the appellate court, and then wimps out on others and says, well, let's find agreement, then, and that's only time will tell if Obama can stop being a wimp.
But that's also another benefit for progressives, I think, because it puts the onus on Obama now. It says, okay, you were complaining about Republican obstruction. Now you don't have it when it comes to your nominees. You've got to put people on in these courts and in these executive branches. You have no excuse now. We will genuinely see your agenda. I mean, let's put it this way. I'm not arguing that we hadn't seen the agenda before, but now there's no excuse. And people should know that just the implications of these 3 judges going on this court, and these are not, these judges are centrists at best. I mean, we are not talking about the Goodwin Liu's here. Who I don't, these are judges who have served, one of whom, the last one, I think, Millett, was getting, accolades from Republican, old line Republicans, sort of,
right.
George Herbert Walker, Barack
right,
Obama.
I'm not saying all these judges will be great, but they still won't be Alito and Scalia.
That's right.
And there's a huge difference between a moderate, look, I want them all to be progressives, of course, but there's a huge difference between a moderate judge that pays attention to precedent and believes in progress and the 4.5, let's call them, reactionaries sitting on that Supreme Court right now, which I go with 4 3/4. Once in a while on an issue like, sodomy, God help us all, Kennedy has common sense, but on numerous other issues, and he's even now seeming to back off of his ruling in his Roe versus Wade ruling.
Right.
In other decisions he's making, he's just said that what Texas is doing is not considered to be an undue burden on women, even though you may have to travel a freaking year to get to an abortion clinic. And so obviously this is, and he's getting towards 80 years old. So is Scalia.
Yep.
So these filling these making sure that when we have this is one of the big projects of the Federalist Society and of Reagan was to remake the judiciary. They did. It's now heading back in the right direction. And we need it to go further. Okay, let's get to Kennedy. Sorry.
I want to get to Kennedy, but I also just want to remind people that there are 3 major sort of policy arenas that are going to be impacted by these justices, these judges, I should say, who are going to be supposedly brought back up for nomination in December, that they will deal with. They will deal with, and we have talked about this. We had a great interview with Haley Sweetland Edwards some time ago about what is chipping away at Dodd-Frank. One of the major things was that you had corporate lawyers going in, and these regulators, they'd get tied up by these corporate lawyers who said, we're going to sue you in this D.C. circuit, and you're going to lose. And they knew they were going to lose, the regulators, and so they had to write these regulations with fear of being overturned by this court. That's going to change. With all the stuff the EPA that the president announced that the EPA wants to go forward with in terms of climate and in terms of sort of more, in particular in terms of climate change, these now are not going to face the roadblock at this court. Also, labor market regulation. This is the court that said that those recess appointments of the National Labor Relations Board were invalid. And that's
right.
And this is a court that could have potentially, if there's ever an opportunity to get card check, would strike that down. This is going to have major implications for policy, and it's going to be.
Well, this is Obama's legacy at this point, because nothing's getting through the House, and after the huge Obamacare, disaster of that rollout, they took a 9-point, generic ballot lead, and they threw it in the garbage, and we're now back to equal. Meaning that the whole shutdown effect is gone. Now, the Republicans still have plenty of time to do unbelievably dumb things, and they tend to. And we've got more shutdown drama potentially coming up. We've got more debt ceiling drama. And so they can find themselves. But even in the case, a couple of guys in swing seats have already
announced they're retiring. But even so, it's looking like it's going to be a huge haul to try to pick up the House. So in the end, it's the writing of the rules by his agencies, and it's those rules being endorsed and accepted by the courts are really where he's going to be able to make any difference at this point.
Yep.
And that's what he needed this for.
And I think you're going to see, obviously the stakes of the Senate campaigns across the country were huge to begin with, but this makes them even more, the stakes here are going to be just massive. And it's going to be...
Although, good things to remind people of, also, they will be massive in 2014, and yet at the same time, with a Democrat at the top of the ticket in 2016, the whole class of 2010 is going to have to get reelected. All the people that are way too far right-wing for places where they won, Republicans, mind you.
Yep.
Kelly Ayotte, Ron Johnson, Pat Toomey, Marco Rubio. I mean, these are people that in swing states and Democratic states are going to have to find ways to get reelected. And for the first time in a few cycles, there'll be a lot more of them on the ballot, and with a Democratic presidential candidate likely winning in places like New Hampshire and Wisconsin. So there is that to keep in mind.